Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be making this patriotic painting that looks like a flag in the sky. The materials you're going to need for today's project are a small round brush and a large flat brush. The colors of paint you're going to need are white, red, black, and ultramarine blue. We're going to start our paintings by painting the background first. The first thing you're going to do is take your brush and load some of your ultramarine blue paint on it. You don't want too much paint on there because you're just going to be using this to draw a line across your canvas. Your line should be 1 to 2 inches above the bottom of your canvas. This is where your ground and your sky are going to meet, so you don't want too much ground. You want your line fairly straight, but it's okay if it's not perfectly straight because the ground isn't perfectly straight. If you have a canvas, you'll also want to make your line wrap around the sides if you plan on extending your painting around the sides of your canvas. You're then going to take your ultramarine blue and you're going to paint your entire canvas above that line that you painted on there. Your paint is going to be a little bit transparent, and that's okay. That's just how this ultramarine paint is. If you have a professional ultramarine paint, then it is likely a little bit more opaque. We just have to put on several layers to get this to start looking a little less see-through. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up while I paint everything above the line on my canvas. I'm just finishing up painting the background of my canvas. Once it's all covered, I'm going to dry it, and I will see you when it's dry. My painting is dry now, and I'm starting to apply a second layer of just the ultramarine blue. Your painting is still going to be a little bit transparent, and that's okay. I like all of my brush strokes to go in nice even strokes across my sky, but this is where you can start trying out some of your own styles, and you can see what it looks like if your brush strokes go in different directions or go straight up and down. The next part of this painting, you don't have to dry it, but you need to load your brush with ultramarine and a little bit of black, and you're going to paint your whole sky using both of these colors. You want to make sure that you blend them in really, really well and it turns into a dark blue. If you want a brighter sky, you're going to use a lot less black, if any black at all. You don't have to get the very, very top, as we are going to be adding just black up there, but you want to get most of it so that we can blend it in. Then you're going to dry this painting, and I will see you when it's dry. Our painting is all dry now. You can touch it to make sure. We're going to be loading our paintbrush with black paint, and starting from the top, we're going to be putting a couple inches of just black paint at the top. Be careful to not get too much black paint on your brush at one time, otherwise you might end up adding a lot more black than you need going down your painting. So just add a little bit at a time. I start with the very outside edge of my canvas to make sure that I don't forget to paint the sides of my canvas. The lower I get with my black, I start getting more of a dry brush technique, which means that my brush hardly has any water on it, and it has just a little tiny bit of paint because I'm going to want to blend that into my sky. Now here in a minute, we're going to load up our brush with some ultramarine blue, and we're going to work it right in there where our black and our blue meet. And you want to keep on going back and forth. You can add a little bit of water to your brush if you need to, but you just want to make sure that they're blended really nicely. So you just want to work on them back and forth until they start to blend. You can go up and down with your painting to make sure that it blends nicely both ways. And then you can go down and you can add some more blue, and maybe with a little bit of black down the rest of your canvas, and you just want to make sure that it all fades out really nicely. It doesn't have to fade out perfectly because it is a sky. You just want to make sure that you don't have any harsh lines where your black and your blue meet. If you get areas where it looks like you're just pulling paint off of your canvas and it's not blending at all, that means that you just have a lot of paint on there that's built up that is too wet. And if you just dry your canvas for a moment, you can come back and start layering up paint there as well. I have a small spot on my upper right that was doing that. And remember that we are going to have white and red that overlap on our sky, so it's okay if we do have some spots that aren't looking quite perfect because they are going to be covered up quite a bit. You just want to be able to see the blue a little bit through the background. This painting ended up being quite dark, and it's okay if yours is a lot brighter. And I will see you when it's dry. My canvas is dry now, and I am going to flip it upside down so that it's a little bit easier to work on the bottom. I'm going to be using black paint with my flat brush, and I'm going to be painting the rest of my canvas black. Once you've painted the bottom black, you're going to dry this again and you're going to flip it upright. We're ready to start adding our flag. We're going to switch to our round brush, but we're going to be using the back end of it to put on our stars. You're going to dip the back end of your brush in the white paint. And you're going to start by marking the area that your stars are going to be on the upper left-hand corner. I start by putting dots that are in the general area where my stars are going to end on my flag, and then I can go back and start adding in the rest of them in that square. I also put some around the top and the side of my canvas where my stars are wrapped around it. You want to have enough stars that it looks kind of like the night sky, but it also resembles an American flag. You're going to clean out your brush when you're done, and you're going to switch back to your flat brush. And we're going to load it with white paint first. I'm getting all of the extra water out of my brush to make sure that it's a lot more dry while I'm working with it, because I don't want my paint to be too thick. These stripes are supposed to resemble colored clouds in the sky. I'm going to be using the skinny side of my brush with a very little bit of paint. If you realize once you touch your canvas that you have too much paint, you'll want to clean off your brush entirely and use the paint that's already on there. So I'm starting at the top and I'm making some light wisps of paint. And then I'm going to turn it along the fat side of it and I'm going to work it back and forth. You're going to do the same process by adding a little bit of paint, using the skinny side to go across. You're going to come down about 1 inch and you're going to make another line. And then you're going to turn your brush sideways and brush it back and forth. My clouds on this one are a little bit more opaque than they would normally be, and that's okay. You're going to do the same process again, coming down 1 to 2 inches with a little more paint. If you still have a lot of paint on your brush, you do not need to add more. You can just come back down, going along the narrow end and then turning it along its fat side and brushing back and forth. And one more time. If you realize that you made your paint too opaque, don't worry about it. We'll come back once it dries and we'll add a little bit more blue back to it. That's all of our white stripes, so we're going to clean out our brush and we're going to switch to the red. And we're going to do the same process with red. Red is going to be a little bit different because the red is very transparent, especially against a really dark background. So this is going to look bright whenever we apply it, but it's going to dry really dark. So it's possible that you're going to need to add another layer of red if you don't like the way that it looks after it dries. The darker your background, the more that you're going to see this with. And it's okay if these overlap each other because they're clouds and not necessarily cloth on a flag. Once you get to the bottom, you can go back up and start adding to some of your other stripes if you've noticed that there's something that doesn't quite look right as it's starting to dry, or if you want to make them look like they have more gaps in between them. So here I'm going back and I'm adding some more red to brighten up my stripes a little bit. My sky got really dark on this painting, so my stripes are going to be a lot darker once they dry. And again, if you have professional paints and you're painting this red in professional paints, it's possible that your paint is not as transparent as the student paints that I'm using to do this. If you ever want to purchase the paints that I do use Blick acrylic paints from Dick Blick. I'm going back in and I'm trying to add some more darker white areas to make it look like my clouds are not flat and they have a little bit of dimension. But I'm trying to be very careful to not make them really opaque. My top cloud is one of those situations where you keep on trying to fix it and it starts to look a little bit worse and you just have to know when to stop. I will let you guys watch me keep working on my stripes here, and once they are completed, you're going to dry your painting and I will see you when it's dry. Our painting's dry, and the last thing we have to do is add our trees. We're going to use our round brush, the bristle side this time. We're going to be using black paint. I'm going to show you a few different ways before we get started to do your trees if you don't feel comfortable doing the trees that I'm doing. All of our trees are going to start with a stick, but this first one we're going to draw a straight line. And starting from the top, you're going to make wisps coming out the side. You want them to be smaller at the top and gradually get longer as they go down. And you want to do one side at a time usually, but you can do it however you'd like. But that's the first way. The second way also starts with a stick. This one you're just making a triangle on top of that stick and filling it in. These are all going to be different kinds of pine trees. But our next one we're going to draw another stick, and you're going to make triangles that overlap each other just a little bit, and they get larger as they go down your tree. And then you'll fill them in. And then the last tree is the one that I'm going to be doing, where I make a stick and I'm going to be using the flat brush. I'm going to dip the corner of it in black paint. I'm going to be keeping it at an angle as I work my way down, and I'm going to tap it back and forth across my tree. I'm going to lay it against a surface so that I have something behind it, and I'm going to tap back and forth, leaving spaces in between each of my branches. and it's going to look like it's implied that there's a bunch of pine needles on my tree. That's the style that I'm going to be using on my painting. You can use whichever one you're more comfortable with. So I'm going to switch back to my round brush real quick, and I'm going to make all of the sticks that are the bases of my trees going across the bottom. I don't want them to be uniform. I want them to appear random. So I don't want any even numbers, and I don't want them the same on either side. So the best that I can, I'm going to make them random. Now that those are on, I'm going to switch back to my flat brush, and I'm going to add all of the branches and needles to them. So again, I take my brush and I dip the corner of it in my black paint. I have it angled almost at a vertical angle to start out at the top, and it gets a lot more horizontal as I work my way down. I ran out of black paint, so I have to grab a little bit more. You can also do this with the fan brush, which is what Bob Ross would use, but I'm not a big fan of fan brushes, so I use my flat brushes or bright brushes, which is what I'm using in this painting, to paint a lot of my trees. It's okay if your branches overlap each other while you're painting your trees, because they're silhouetted, so you won't be able to see which one is in front of each other anyways. With the smaller ones, you have to be a lot more careful to make sure that your branches don't get too wide, because your tree is very small or it is very far away. If you try this method and it doesn't work out and your painting starts to get really dark where your trees are, you can just cover them up with those triangles that I showed you in those other examples. We're just finishing up our painting here today, and once I'm done with this last tree, we'll be all done with this painting. I really hope you enjoyed painting this with me today, and I will catch you in the next one.